All right, you're welcome back. Today is the International Day of Social Justice. The United Nations Day is celebrated annually to encourage people to look at how social justice affects poverty eradication.
Well, social justice encompasses the hope for a world free from barriers of race, class, gender, religion, culture, sexuality, and so many more. Well, social justice is an underlying principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence within and among nations.
Now, the theme for this year is Workers on the Move, the quest for social justice. Well, most migration today is linked directly or indirectly to the search for decent work opportunities. And most migrants face inhuman or inhumane work conditions in their host countries.
Now, how do we ensure social justice for all, irrespective of race, sex, and religion? We have joining us in the studio lawyer Tosin Akande to talk to us more about that. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, too.
Good to
Yes,
see you.
it's estimated that about 258 million migrants, crossing borders, going to other coasts, seeking better conditions for themselves, and looking at the theme for the year, that ultimately, at one point or the other, they would want to get jobs, to take care of themselves.
Okay.
And then with the growing resistance from some countries against migrants that we don't want you, don't belong here, how is it important that as humans, you need to have social justice at the back of your mind when relating with another person?
Well, thank you for having me, first and foremost. I think it's very important to stress that on a day like this, maybe countries in the West could be celebrating, but not for third world nations, as we have much of them in Africa and Asia and in the Latin Americas. You see, the truth is, they say, as we say in law, if you must do equity, you will have to come to equity with clean hands. So if you are seeking as Africans social justice to be done unto you by those in the West, you have to ensure that social justice has been done right from home. Okay, because we pay lip service to everything in this part of the world. Maybe I need to advert the minds of the viewers that if you look at Chapter 2 of our hallowed Constitution, I'm talking about the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policies. These things are outlined. There's Section 23 of it that talks about specifically the social objectives. There's also Section 17 that mentions social objectives. All these things that have been highlighted by the UN and the ILO were repeated more or less verbatim, word for word. But what happens? Pay lip service to everything. We don't get it done until those in the West will begin to sing it into our eardrums that we need to talk about the International Day of Social Justice, which is already part of our
and then we join
Constitution.
in the celebration.
And we join in celebrating what we have acknowledged in our own Constitution.
You know, the question I was going to ask you first off, it was exactly how has Nigeria fared as far as social justice is concerned? But maybe we should even define exactly what we mean by social justice. I was speaking with an analyst not too long ago who drew my attention to the fact that on the Nigerian coat of arms, you have for peace and progress. And you don't have the word justice there. And without justice, can you really achieve peace and progress? And he was like, maybe we should go and redesign our coat of arms so that we can actually get it right.
Well, I respect that person's view and his opinion, but I like the word you used, that maybe we should even define social justice. Exactly. And that's the angst that I have against, on one hand, the UN, and then on the other hand, the Nigerian setting.
Yeah. Okay.
Social justice, according to the United Nations, includes all those things that, as is that highlighted, exclusions, exclusive issues on diversity, sexuality, gender, and so on and so forth. But in my humble opinion, at least, if I have no element of exposure to Western education, I read law. And I know that social justice is not all those things per se. As the word implies, you can have justice in different forms. There's natural justice. Yeah. Okay, there's the law of karma. There's all kinds of justice. Courtroom justice, legal pronouncements in courts. There are forms of justice. But social justice is, I'll take it as an offshoot of what we used to say about law, that law must not only be seen to be done, but also, law must not only be had to be done, but also be seen to be done. Okay, so now you ask the question, do we do social justice in Nigeria? How well have we fared? Zero. Okay, if we have embraced the concept of social justice nationally and internally, if we internalize the values, we won't have all these kind of reports in the media 7 men died today, Mieti Allah, Fulani headsmen, and so on. We do nothing. People get killed in this country. You don't know the perpetrators of those dastardly acts. It amounts to social justice. Justice that is only heard in court and not seen to be done cannot be said to be justice. More especially, or most importantly, when you say social justice. Yeah. So that is what we should set as an agenda. We shouldn't be accepting everything hook, line, and sinker from the West.
Okay, so what should be the focus now, you know, if you want to bring it back home? Because you said earlier, like you said, that social justice abroad won't be the same way here. And the mere fact that Nigerians leave the country in droves, many pass through Sahara Desert to foreign lands just to escape the country, means that a lot is not
right with
the system. Absolutely. So what should be the focus now? Is it that the government doesn't care, or the government just doesn't understand it?
Well, I won't put the blame on government alone. I think it's a system error. It's an error within the system, both on the part of the led and the part of the leaders. Okay, so until you see, one thing I can't take away from the military regimes, I don't want them, they're an aberration constitutionally. But you see, in the time of I was singing that song as I was coming here this morning when your man came to pick me up. We are all Mamsa people. We want the basic things of life. That's under a military regime. So if a military regime of Babangida as a between 85 and 93, you know Mamsa. Yeah. That's the story of Mamsa. It's about social justice. It's about the things that ought to be done on the part of the government, the things that, as we have duties on the part of we, the citizens, so also we enjoy, where we have rights.
But these were things that were taught in primary school, you know, that where your right ends, the other person
begins from another person's point of view. Yes. Okay, now that is why it's a shock to somebody like us, to people like us, that look, these things have to be institutionalized. When we had MAMSA, it was one of the finest days of our humanitarian levels. But now everything has reduced to barbarism.
What would you ascribe as the cause of that? Really?
I think over time, I would say negligence on the part of everybody. All the agents of socialization there are can't exonerate themselves from this. I'm talking about the churches and the mosques, for instance, the family, the home. And of course, we in the media, because before I became a lawyer, I used to tell some of you that I've been a journalist before too. So those of us in the media, for instance, should take up what I call an agenda-setting theory. The kind of theory we do right now will not, and I insist, will not favor third world nations like Africa. You see, it's a top-to-bottom thing. And we, like, you can just see, for example, we just take it. The UN is celebrating. We should also be able to set an agenda. And then let me give you a secret. Yeah. I noticed that I was looking at the conditions of aged people. Who should be more concerned about old people, if not Africans? We even have a saying that if an old man dies in Africa, it's like a library set ablaze in Europe. Yeah. So we value old people the more. But to my shock, I saw the UN Day on Old People. And then they fixed it on, wait for it, 1st of October. No. Nigeria's Independence Day. So if we had been active on the international plane for relevant purposes, that probably would have happened. We would have fixed another day for it.
Okay, so this year's theme is Workers on the Move, the quest for social justice. As far as this, the Nigerian worker is concerned, how much justice, or social justice, if you like, is he really getting? The Nigerian worker has been fighting for decent pay, for decent work, and a decent environment to work in for eons of years, for as long as we can remember. 18,000 naira minimum wage is still what it is. Of course, a committee has been set up to look at the minimum wage. I wonder what's that, you know, what's going to become of that. Well, let's talk about that for a bit.
Well, I've been saying it for a long time. This is not the first time where we're saying that. It's total injustice, and it will amount to, it's only going to merely advertise us as the value of our nuisance value. When people get paid millions in allowances and what have you, and the majority of the people, the workers, the labor, they get 18,000 naira pittance. So it's social injustice right on the face of it at the barest minimum. So it makes a mockery of us. You know, when you realize that even the institution that is responsible for the payment of these Nigerian elites is even constitutionally guaranteed. I'm talking about the RAMFA, the Revenue Mobilization Committee, and so on. So it's just funny that it's like Nigeria was established only for the nouveau riche and no interest in in the heart, about the people that constitute the bulk of the civil service. Okay. Then this year's theme, according to them, it's just a way of repeating what we've always known, the brain drain. It's the issue of the brain drain. People will keep leaving Nigeria in droves as long as the condition remains
still has
the way
to do with
migration,
yes. International migration. 258 million people moving around the world. 150 million migrant workers. 56% of them are men.
That's right.
And 44
what
are women.
What that stat hasn't pointed out is to point out the source of the continent that is responsible for the chunk of those moving around. But I tell you, if they subject that to research, it's going to be Africa or Asia or the Latin America. It's never going to be that of Europe.
In fact, Nigeria lost some graduates. About 60% of lives lost across the Sahara Desert in 2016 were graduates. Very sad indeed. And we're talking about workers moving within the country, if you want to bring it back home. Yeah. It's even sad that some cannot even leave their jobs to even get better ones, because where are the good jobs?
Where are the jobs?
On one hand, graduates are now teachers in most private schools. How much are they paid? Nobody's talking about that. And then, like you said earlier, it's not just the blame. We shouldn't just lay the blame on the government, because as individuals as well, as business owners, SMEs and MSMEs owners, how are you treating your workers? And what is the welfare?
If you remember, flashback to 5 years ago when we had this talk on Valentine, I said, if I were the president of Nigeria, I would seize that occasion to talk about virtues. We need a moral reorientation in this country. There is no love lost between our people, not just on the one hand the leaders, and the other hand the people. Nigerians, in real sense, like, they don't love themselves.
The mutual lack of love,
yes,
mutual distrust.
There is general hate in the atmosphere. We need to have a leader who is going to be compassionate enough. Looking at the economic recovery of a nation only, and not looking at the cultural and the moral dimension to it, is seeking for the downfall of that nation. You can reduce it to the life of an individual. Is it all about money? No. Is it all about economic ability, empowerment? You hear politicians saying economic empowerment. They are not talking moral empowerment. It's important. I am the way I am, for instance, because I remember I took moral instruction as an academic course.
Didn't we?
As a subject in primary school. So these things happening at the formative stages of the individual becomes a very serious and germane issue. So when someone is growing, even we all know that when you teach a child the way he should grow, when he grows up, he will depart from it. We need a leader who is compassionate about the people enough to know that, okay, as I'm making efforts to do economic recovery and make Nigeria prosperous economically,
so when we
I also
talk
need
about
to culturally and morally
we talk
prepare
about,
these people.
Restructuring and all kinds of revolutions, and a former leader said, look, what we really need is moral restructuring.
That's right.
That is the foundation that we need.
That is it. That is the substructure.
Yes.
That is the foundation upon which every society is built. Sometimes I interact with young people, and I love to talk to them about government, for instance, as an institution, and government as a field of study. Yeah. And I tell them that the best form of leadership for a third world nation like us, at the moment, is still, nothing goes on for long, is socialism and not capitalism. And then they say, sir. I said, look, it has its merits. It says from each according to ability, to each, and to each according to his needs. It's telling you about how morally compassionate one gifted individual can be with respect to one who is less gifted. It's talking about having attention for those who do not have. These are the fulcrum of the concept of social justice.
Traditional African societies were always like that.
It's never been capitalist.
But we seem to have gotten it wrong.
It's all part of the problem I talked about, taking everything from the West, hook, line, sinker, and both. You have to subject them to local circumstances.
Okay, is there any role education can play at this point? Because we know when growing up there were subjects like civic education, where pupils were taught on how to love the country, just for the love of the country, what they are supposed to do as citizens. But now a lot is happening, unemployment and all that. And when you talk to some youths, just recently a musician came out to criticize other artists that they shouldn't support internet fraud. But some other musicians and some Nigerians came out to bash him, that he should just keep quiet because he came from a privileged family, that what these people are doing are justified.
Well, such a musician shouldn't keep quiet, because when you are convinced, there's nothing like conviction. When you are convinced in what you're doing, no matter the opposition, you keep at it. That's the kind of musician people like us should celebrate. The media should be celebrating, because he's setting the right agenda for the future, not just the today of these young people, but their future.
All right.
I've told every young person I've come across that money is not your immediate need. Direction is your immediate need. When you are properly directed, you have money. Whether you like it or not, it must come. If given 8 hours to fell a tree, spend 7 hours preparing. At one strike,
you'll get it right.
The tree gets down.
Okay. Tosin Akonde is a lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, talking about International Day for Social Justice. Of course, the UN Secretary Antonio Guterres pledged to make 2017, which was last year, a year for peace. But still, millions around the world are suffering massively from unending wars. That's quoting him right there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll take a short break. And when we come back, we'll take a look at that dead or alive order. Capture him, dead or alive.